Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radhe. Jai Gora Nitai, Jaya Gora Nitai, Gora Nitai, Jai Gora Nitai. Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Radha Kanta Shri Gornikai, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Kantara Srimad Bhagavatam, Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, we first offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed, practically nil, and thus the loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental hymn, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, questions by Vidura, text number 26. Please repeat. Kachit Purana Purusho Vanabhya Kachit Purana Purusho Vanabhya.
Wait a minute, what are you doing?
Text 26.
25, isn't it?
I thought Mayapur did 25 yesterday. What's on the board?
25.
Okay, Mayapur must have did 24. Okay. Sa Vasudeva Nucharam Prasantam Sadvasudeva Nucharam Prasantam Brihaspate Prak Tanayam Pratitam Brihaspate Prak Tanayam Pratitam Alinya Gadam
Gadham
Pranayena
Pranayena
Badram
Badram
Alinya Gadam Pranayena Badram
Alingya Gadam Pranayena Badam
Swanam
Svanam
Aprichchad
Apichat
Bhagavat
Bhagavat
Prajanam
Prajanam
Swanam Aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam
Svanam Apichat Bhagavat Prajanam
Sadvasudevanucharam prasantam
Sabasudevanucharam prasantam
Brihadpate prak Tanayam pratitam
Prahaspate Praktanayam Pratitam
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Alingyagadam Pranayena Badram
Swanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam
Svanam Aprastat Bhagavat Prajanam
Sadvasudevanucharam prasantam
Sabasudevanucharam prasantam
Brihaspate praktanuyam pratitam
Prahaspate Praktanayam
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Alingyam Gadam Pranayena Badram
Swanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam
Svanam Aprishat Bhagavat Prajanam
Sadvasudevanucharam prasantam
Savasudevanucharam prasantam
Brihaspate praktanuyam pratitam
Brihaspate Praktanayam Pratitam
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Alingyagadam Pranayena Badram
Swanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam
Svanam Apichat Bhagavat Pranatanam Savasudevanucharam prasantam
Sadvasudevanucharam prasantam
Brihaspate Praktanayam Pratitam
Brihaspate praktanayam pratitam
Alangyagadam Pranayena Badram
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Svanam Aprastat Bhagavat Prajanam
Swanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam
Savasudevanucharam prasantam
Savasudevanucharam prasantam
Brahaspate praktanayam pratitam
Brihaspate praktanayam pratitam
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Svanam aprichat Bhagavat Prajanam
Svanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam Sarvasudevanucharam prasantam Brihaspate praktanayam pratitam Alinyagadam pranayena badram
Svanam aprichat
Prichchad Bhagavat Prajanam Savasudevanucharam prasantam Brihaspate praktanayam pratitam Alinyagadam pranayena badram Svanam aprichchad Bhagavat Prajanam Sarvasudevanu charam prashantam Brihaspate pranayam pratitam Alinyagadam pranayena bhadram Svanama prichad bhagavanja prajanam Sarvasudevanu charam prashantam Brihaspate pranayam pratitam Alinyagadam pranayena bhadram Svanama prichad bhagavat prajanam. Anyone else? Saha, he, Vidura, Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, Anucharan, constant companion, Rashantam, very sober and gentle, Brihashpate of Brihaspati, the learned spiritual master of the demigods. Prak, formerly. Tanayam, son or disciple. Pratitam, acknowledged. Alingya, embracing. Gadam, very feelingly. Pranayena, in love. Vadram, auspicious. Swanam, his own. Aprichat, asked. Bhagavat, of the personality of Godhead. Prajanam, family. Srila Prabhupada's translation, please repeat. Then, due to his great love and feeling, Vidura embraced him. Uddhava, who was a constant companion of Lord Krishna. And formerly a great student of Brihaspati. Vidura then asked him for news of the family of Lord Krishna. The personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. Vidura was older than Uddhava, like a father, and therefore, when the two met, Uddhava bowed down before Vidura, and Vidura embraced him because Uddhava was younger, like a son. Vidura's brother, Pandu, was Lord Krishna's uncle, and Uddhava was a cousin to Lord Krishna. According to social custom, therefore, Vidura was to be respected by Uddhava on the level of his father. Uddhava was a great scholar in logic, and he was known to be a son or disciple of Brihaspati, the greatly learned priest and spiritual master of the demigods. Vidura asked Uddhava about the welfare of his relatives, although he had already knew that they were no longer in the world. This inquiry appears to be very queer, but Srila Jiva Goswami states that the news was shocking to Vidura, who therefore inquired again due to great curiosity Thus, his inquiry was psychological and not practical. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 25th sloka of the first chapter, third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, questions by Vidura. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I offer my obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, who is opening our eyes with the torch of knowledge, although they were certainly shut by the darkness of ignorance. Rupa Goswami, Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give us shelter under his lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Such an amazing time. Krishna appearing on earth and all these great devotees, Vidura, incarnation of Yamaraj, and Uddhava, practically the prime minister of Lord Krishna, is just most confidential servant. And Krishna could always talk all sorts of confidential things, including very, very important political business. He could, and then very, very intimate spiritual matters, to the extent of sending Uddhava to meet the gopis in Vrindavan, Radharani and all the gopis, and try to give them some message from him and try to pacify their broken hearts, while actually witnessing the great, tremendous love they felt in separation from Krishna. So, Uddhava was a greatly advanced devotee. As we'll see, he's so advanced that Vidura wants to inquire from him, but they generally very strictly follow the social etiquette, and Uddhava could not allow that, because Vidura was like a father to him, and he didn't want his father, inquiring into transcendental subject matter from him as though he was a student of his. So he observed that. He didn't take some sort of pride that, well, here comes one of the sons of Vyasadeva, and he's inquiring from me like my student. No, he revealed to him that the great sage Maitreya, who was even more elderly than Vidura, Vidura appeared in the world as the son of Dhritarashtra, not Dhritarashtra, his brother, as the son of is the son of one of the husbands of those princesses, those two princesses.
You mean the Chitravirya?
Yeah, the Chitravirya was his father, but he had passed on early in life due to, I think Prabhupada writes, tuberculosis. So he had passed away, and his other brother had been killed in a battle with the king of the Gandharvas. So, the queens were left issueless. They had no children, no sons, no heirs to the throne that meant. Because Bhishma had taken the vow not to accept a wife in order for his father to win the hand of Satyavati, the queen of the fishermen, daughter of the leader of the fishermen. who was miraculously given some special power by Vyasadev's sage friend. Vyasadeva was, born from her in that sage. What was that sage's name? He's a famous person for teaching astronomy or astrological knowledge. Not Parashuram. Parashuram, yeah. So, Vyasadeva was born from her, was her son. And, because it was a celestial birth from a great sage, he never had any baby pastimes, childhood pastimes, like he immediately grew up and left to go up and practice austerities, just taking up his previous dharma. He was to become the empowered literary incarnation of the Lord. So, but he told his mother, whenever there's a need, you just think of me and do not worry, I will come. So when the two princes to be king passed away, then there was a problem because Satyavati's husband had already left for the forest practicing austerities in order to go back home to Godhead. The father of Bhishma refused to take a wife. Satyavati tried to induce him to do so, saying that, what is the use of this vow? Now we need a son. So, you should give children to these princesses. You should marry them. But he refused to do that based on the vow, but he gave her the idea, the solution, that you should call your son Vyasadeva, because in those days and times when you face such a predicament, the husband has passed on, and the woman is childless, and a great Brahmin or sage or even one brother could be called. And so she called Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva first begot Dhritarashtra, because the princess was appalled upon seeing Vyasadeva, who Satyavati refused to allow to clean up, so to speak. He wanted some time to change his demeanor, because he had been off in the Himalayas just practicing austerities, surrounded by fire and living in the cold water in the winter. So his body was, soiled, and his hair was matted, and he was, would assume extremely thin, ribs probably showing. So when this young princess who was used to living amongst powerful Kshatriyas, sees that this is the person who is going to give her a child, her spontaneous response was she was very appalled and couldn't even look on him. And so consequently, her son was born blind and would not be able to take the role of the king, because it's very difficult to be a blind king. You cannot study the face of those people that you must pass some judgment on. And nor can you study the face of your ministers and those ambassadors from other kingdoms, and to find out whether they're lying or something. So he was unqualified to be a king, plus it's very hard to fight in battle without eyes. Dhritarashtra had perfected the use of sound, but still he was crippled, being blind, to fight against ever powerful Kshatriyas. So Satyavati asked Vyasadeva to please give a child to the ever queen. And same thing sort of happened. She was aghast and turned pale upon seeing him, but she didn't close her eyes. And consequently, Pandu was born with a very pale complexion, but qualified to be king. Still, Satyavati didn't want to take any chances, because something could happen, just like what happened to her sons. Her two sons, died early. So now, we should have another child. So she asked the first princess, please have a child. The first one was born blind. Please have another child now. You'll be prepared. But she couldn't digest it. She was it was just too much for her. So she sent a maidservant. And this Sudrani was, very appreciative and felt very privileged to be able to have intercourse with the great sage Vyasadeva and to have a son from such a great person. And consequently, the Durga was born, an incarnation of Yamaraj, who would become, a greatly learned, profound minister to give direction to Pandu and to Dhritarashtra. Came very close to Dhritarashtra from the time they were young. He was always helping his blind brother. We all know the story of Pandu, how Pandu was cursed on his hunting expedition, and therefore he had to live as a renunciate in the forest. Otherwise the curse would take effect as soon as he tried to beget children, which is the duty of the king. The king has to beget children and train them so that there's someone who can manage the government when they leave. So Pandu was in this predicament, he could have no children. On the other hand, when Pandu didn't return to stay in the forest, it was decided that Dhritarashtra would rule in his absence, but the protection of the kingdom would be in the hands of Bhishma. But still, Dhritarashtra assumed the role of the king, so Bhishma served at the discretion of the king. He had taken some vow as well that he would always protect the throne of the Kuru dynasty. So he was obligated to serve the order of Dhritarashtra. And consequently, there could be no criminals or no foreign powers threatening the Kuru dynasty, because Bhishma was there as the protector. There's a Nashtika brahmachari and a warrior trained in heavenly planets who had the use of every astra that existed, practically speaking, and even was able to compete with the incarnation of Godhead Parashuram, his very own guru, martial arts guru. So there, he was not an ordinary person. In fact, he was a Mahajan, and the major part of the whole Mahabharata consists of Bhishma's instructions to King Yudhisthira on how to live in this world. So eventually, though, Pandu succumbed. Actually, before that, he figured out a way to have children by the grace of Lord Krishna's aunt, the sister of his father, Queen Kunti. She had won that benediction from Durvasa Muni to be able to call any deva to beget children. She possessed such a mantra, but she served Durvasa Muni so nicely, he had given her that mantra. So when Pandu heard this, he was so happy that he immediately asked her to call the deva Yamaraj and to get a child. And so Yudhisthira was born. And then he wanted someone strong to protect Yudhisthira. And so he asked her to call Vayu. And Vayu begot Bhima. who possessed the strength of 10,000 elephants. And then he wanted naturally more children to protect the throne, so he asked her to call Indra, and Arjuna was born. And then he asked her again, but she refused more than 3 times. And so he persuaded her to give the mantra to Madri, a co-wife. But Madri was very smart, and she called the sons of Suryadev the Ashwini Kumaras, the physicians of the Devas. So she begot twin children, Sahadeva and Nakula. And Kunti would never use the mantra again, wouldn't allow her to use the mantra again. And one day, Pandu fell in love with Madhuri on a perfect spring day, plucking flowers for the offerings. Pandu was struck by the arrows of Cupid, and when he attempted to have a child, he immediately died. And so all these young children, I think Yudhisthira maybe he was the eldest, and he was a young adolescent. The sages decided they needed to return to their parental home, which was the royal court of the Kaurava dynasty. And so they were brought there, and the dilemma was described, and Dhritarashtra, their uncle, their father's brother, accepted them in. And the great competition between Dhritarashtra's children, he had 100 children from Gandhari, the queen who he married, who was the princess of what we call Afghanistan today. And along with her came, practically speaking, the personification of Kali, a brother who was adamant that he would have vengeance against the Kaurava dynasty for marrying his sister to a blind king. So,
Personification of Dwapara.
but Dwapara Yuga, I've heard the opposite, because he was a great cheater. Anyway, it may say different things in different places. Maybe what I read was wrong. So, anyhow, he was a great cheater, and he exhibited that throughout life, practically speaking, repaying the Kaurava dynasty, what he considered to be an unrighteous thing. So, Bhishma suffered greatly trying to manage this kingdom, because him and Satyavati arranged this marriage. He also arranged for his stepbrothers to marry those queens, those princesses, those 2 princesses, and there was a third one who became the eternal enemy of Bhishma. And that, the story gets wrong because of that. But so Bhishma always had these problems. As a brahmachari trying to manage the kingdom, he had these women that hated him, or that he could never really satisfy. So anyhow, lost my train of thought there, but Lord Krishna, on the other hand, he appeared in the Yadu dynasty, which is some sort of subdivision of the Kaurava dynasty. They're all part of the dynasty coming from the moon god, from Somadev. And so he's the cousin of Arjuna, because Arjuna's mother, Kunti, is his aunt, Krishna's aunt. That's his father's sister. So they're cousins. And Uddhava, I don't know who that said Uddhava is Krishna's cousin also, so I'm not sure who Uddhava is born from. But he's Krishna's confidential, most confidential servant. And here he is meeting Vidura, who lives through this whole affair going on in the Kurva dynasty, who has to witness now this competition that's going to go on between Dhritarashtra's sons and Pandu's sons. And the advantage that Dhritarashtra's sons had is that Duryodhana is able to persuade his father to his point of view. And so his father is prejudiced toward Pandu's son instead of being a broad-minded king, a broad-minded person who treats his brother's sons just like his. He can't do that because he's determined that Duryodhana will win the throne. But Duryodhana is younger than Yudhisthira, and Yudhisthira is the rightful heir. And he's also most qualified. So they're at a disadvantage because they're fatherless and they're dependent on their uncle. And Bhishma has to try to play the role of being neutral. So he loves all of them. He can't be partial like Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra is partial to the extent that he just plays ignorant of Duryodhana's attempts to kill the Pandavas. He just knows what's going on, but he has to play like he doesn't. And he's hoping that Duryodhana's plots will be successful, because then Duryodhana will sit on the throne. To the extent he wants his son to sit on the throne that he ultimately divides the kingdom just to pacify Duryodhana, so that there will be no more fighting. So this will solve this. This will stop the fighting between the cousins. We'll divide the kingdom. And then he turns around and gives the worst part of the kingdom to Yudhisthira. Duryodhana gets the capital city, with all of its soldiers and Bhishma and everyone else. And Yudhisthira gets this land that was cursed, where all sorts of snakes live. There's no rain. It's just like southwestern Texas. But Yudhisthira makes it all prosperous by Krishna's grace. And then Duryodhana is even more envious. And so that's when the whole gambling match takes place. And Vidura has to witness all this. He's appealing constantly to Dhritarashtra, don't do this. Now him and Dhritarashtra are very close. From the time they were babies, toddlers. Vidura was Dhritarashtra's eyes. Dhritarashtra depended on him, took his advice. But now, all of a sudden, his advice is going against his dear son. And so, it becomes a very difficult matter for Vidura because he can't win the confidence of Dhritarashtra to not listen to Duryodhana. So, eventually, it gets to the point to where Vidura, as we just read, he has to leave. It's just too much for him. He just leaves rather than fight with Duryodhana, who Duryodhana is ready to take his life. What time is it? Is that clock right? It's just a little bit after 8, so we'll stop in just a few minutes. Oh, before I stop, y'all can quickly look at the newest BTG. One for ladies, one for men. But I have the accent back. I can't give them to you because I don't have many things to send donors nowadays. It's really a big, important thing. So that's the newest BTG. Well, we got about 5 minutes, So.
I thought Prabhu was telling me.
After visiting all these places of pilgrimage, he finally meets Uddhava in the province where the city of Dwarka is located, and that close to the city of Dwarka. And he's seen what has went on, and that's why Prabhupada said this questioning about Uddhava's family. It's psychological because he's traumatized seeing that the whole family's gone. It's shocking to him. So he psychologically inquires from him, basically, what happened. And so it's not practical. He already knows what happened, but it's psychological. He needs some help to digest these happenings. And so he inquires from Uddhava what has happened. I think Uddhava will respond to that, but when it comes to understanding transcendental subject matter, he sends him to Maitreya Rishi. Any comments or questions about all of this?
Yeah, what I've read is the Shakuni is the incarnation of the Dwapara Yuga. Duryodhana, after he leaves his body, when he reincarnates as Kali.
He actually reincarnates as Kali Yuga. Wow. Well, he played a really fantastic role. Not that I would want to accept such a role.
It was interesting. I mean, he was kind of, he comments that because his sister was coerced to marry Dhritarashtra because the power of Bhishma had come and asked for Gandhari's hand for marriage to Dhritarashtra. It was kind of, he had no options to say no. So otherwise Bhishma was ready to fight with them or something. So he felt a vengeance and he wanted to avenge the whole Kuru dynasty. So that's the reason he comes and then he spoils the mind of Duryodhana and then he makes sure the war happens. So he was opposite to Krishna. Krishna did not want the war to happen, but he wanted the war to happen. So, ideologically they are opposite personalities. So Krishna and Shakuni. Shakuni was the Dwapara Yuga, Krishna was the Yuga Avatar. So then he makes sure the war happens and everybody dies. He also dies in that. That's the version I have heard from sources.
And so Krishna took out all the bad Kshatriyas, and then he relieved the burden of the earth by diminishing the Kshatriya might on the earth, by disseminating all the Kshatriyas that fought in the battle of Kurukshetra. Then last but not least, the Yadu dynasty left. But then he left Yudhisthira there. Yudhisthira was there up until the Yadus left, and then they left. But then the heir to the throne, Abhimanyu's son, Parikshit, was there. And when Parikshit left, as we just read about in previous chapters, then his son Jananjaya was there. Then gradually the dynasties diminished as Kali Yuga took effect, and down to Buddha being born. I'm not sure whether that was a dynasty of Surya or a dynasty of Chandra, where Buddha was born.
Buddha?
No, Buddha.
Buddha.
Yeah, 2,500 years ago, so it was already in the Kali Yuga, and Buddha incarnated to stop the Brahmins from performing animal sacrifices. But he was born in the Kshatriya dynasty. I'm not sure if it was a dynasty of the sun god or a dynasty of the moon god.
Not sure. But when you say Buddha, you have two Buddhas. So one, the son of his name. Another is the same, who carries the same name, or who assumed the same name.
Yeah.
He was born in Nepal. The real Buddha was born in Gaya, in India, Bihar. So the two different Buddhas actually.
Right.
One who has taken the name of Buddha.
So the one that Jayadev Goswami sings about as being the incarnation. And in Kali Yuga to stop the sacrifice of animals. So he was born in one of these types of dynasties, but the dynasties had diminished so much by that time, and then on to the present day. But you still have these country clans, just like we had these Brahmin clans. People can trace back their heritage in one of the, these different cultures. Okay, you can stop. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.
Well, they got the camera working.
Good, is it working?
Well, it's on and the lights green, beeping. I mean, I don't know how to tell
turn it
it.
off?
No, I don't know anything about it.
Okay, I'll turn this on. Oh, Krishna.